This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. I'm here with a new friend, Daniel Lesser. He's the co-founder, president, and CEO of LW Hospitality Advisors. Dan, welcome to Business Decoded.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, I heard that you're the guru, anything related to hospitality and hotel, and we had a chance to meet at a conference here in Dallas, Texas, last year, right before the election, and you presented some incredible information about the industry. You went as far back as COVID and spoke about how the industry has changed and grown and evolved and recovered in some cases from COVID. But I'd love to have you tell our guests what it is that you do at LW Hospitality Advisors, and then we can talk about the industry.
Terrific. Well, thank you again. Really do appreciate the invite. So LW Hospitality Advisors, by the way, I'm the L, and my partner's last name begins with W.
Okay.
So we didn't spend a whole lot of money to come up with that name.
So not a lot of consultants at PwC or any of the big firms, right?
Exactly. So we are a hospitality-centric advisory firm, and we offer several different services, and we have three main silos. Silo number one, I characterize as non-advocacy.
Okay.
Appraisals, market studies, valuations, feasibility work, lots of litigation-related work.
Really?
A tremendous amount of it. I serve as an expert witness. I've served as a arbitrator. You know, I'm convinced that you put human beings and capital together, you end up with disputes. It's just inevitable. And candidly, during good times or bad times, right? It's just litigation. Litigation is always happening, and yes, very active in that space. So that's silo number one. I characterize that as non-advocacy because it doesn't matter who our client is. Our findings are our findings within a reasonable range.
Right.
So we could work for a sponsor doing evaluation or a lender. The value is that our opinion of value is what it is within a reasonable range.
Right.
The second silo is an advocacy silo, asset management, and we provide oversight of day-to-day operators on behalf of institutional investors, many of whom are not necessarily hotel savvy, and they need an owner's representative to oversee the day-to-day operator.
That is interesting. Okay.
So that's asset management. A sub-silo within asset management is receivership work. During COVID, we were the court-appointed receiver for a portfolio of 48 select service hotels around the country. The special servicer basically got the keys back, and we stepped in. This was shortly after COVID began. We stabilized the portfolio, and then fielded inbound inquiries. They did not want to hire a broker. They wanted me to field inbound inquiries from prospective investors who might be interested in the portfolio. So make a long story short, we were involved about 18 months and ended up structuring a significant transaction sale of this portfolio of 48 assets. And then a final subsegment within this advocacy silo is working with folks who we very respectfully refer to as newbies to the hotel space.
Sure.
So, hotels tend to attract a fair amount of ego capital and folks that, fall in love with property and look at certain assets as trophy type assets.
Sounds like the ownership of sports teams is really very similar in that regards.
Right. So we'll come in as hotel experts advising these folks. I mean, listen, they're smart, they're sophisticated, they have money or access to money. They know and understand real estate and finance. They just come up short on the hotel expertise. Sure. So we'll come in and work with folks who have a dream in their head to either buy, build a hotel at one end of the spectrum, at the other end of the spectrum, getting it built, open, operational, and then asset managing it, overseeing the day-to-day operator. Between the two pillars, we offer a number of advisory services, advocacy advisory services, such as how big should the hotel be? Should it be branded? If it should be branded, should it be brand managed, or should it be managed by an independent operator? And then we'll run processes and negotiate business points. There's a lot we don't do, but we know the right folks to go to, right? Sure. So attorneys, architects, et cetera, et cetera. And we've been very successful at cultivating a cadre of clients that have sort of latched onto us for one-stop shopping.
So Dan, tell me how you reached this position in life. Did you start at a hotel or with one of the brands? How did you get that level of expertise? Because you cover a wide range in a very complex industry.
Well, that's a great question. Let me just 1 second finish up the last question. Our third silo is a predictive analytics platform. It's called Lodging Analytics Research and Consulting, or LARC, L-A-R-C. It's a one-of-a-kind offering within the lodging industry. It's been fully embraced by institutional investors. It's an amazing service offering. How did I get it? So I was, when I was in school as a youngster and also in high school, I was definitely not all that jazzed up about academics. I was always very entrepreneurial. And in high school, I had actually come across a book called Your Career in Hotels and Motels.
Oh, interesting.
We had lots of motels. And it inspired me to look into the hotel business because I was kind of aimless and always very, entrepreneurial. I started making money on my own when I was 12 years old. Wow.
Where were you at the time? Were you in New York or some other part?
I grew up in Forest Hills, New York.
Okay.
And I used to, we also had a sort of a summer home up in Mayapack, New York, and I used to rake leaves and then I used to like play basketball too, and I would hang out with my friends. We'd be shooting hoops, and these guys were like, they weren't really doing anything. I'm like, you guys should come and work with me. And I was 12 years old. And I ended up having a little business where I had the neighbors to clean their leaves.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Right? And then I got to the point where I was like, wait a second, why am I breaking my back? I was collecting the money, paying them, and keeping the VIG.
I love it.
Fast forward a couple of years later, when the concept of leverage was taught to me, I was like, oh my God, I know what that is. Anyway, so I actually ended up applying to Cornell University when I was in high school. They turned me down. They have a renowned hotel program.
Well, Cornell is such a great university anyway, but yes.
Yes. And then I had also applied to a hotel school in Lausanne, Switzerland, called the École Hôtelière in Lausanne, Switzerland. Make a long story short, I ended up I went to City University of New York for 2 years because to equal a high school education in Switzerland to go to Lausanne, I needed high school here plus 2 years of university. So I went to Baruch College, which is also known as UCLA, University on the corner of Lexington Avenue.
Right.
I went there for 2 years. Then I went to I applied to Cornell again. They turned me down a second time. I went to the École Hôtelière for a year. I did what was called the Cours de Cuisine. I learned how to cook. I make better hard-boiled eggs than anybody you've ever met. When I had completed a year at the École Hôtelière, Cornell had told me to apply a third time, and they thought I might get in, and that's what ended up happening. It was the best thing that they rejected me, and I ended up going to Switzerland. I skied, I learned French, I met some great people, experienced life in another country, and then I got to go to Cornell too, which is where I ultimately graduated from. I worked with Hilton for a number of years at the New York Hilton Hotel, which unfortunately became infamous lately with that assassination of the insurance executive. I used to go in and out of that door every day. The New York Hilton Hotel, 2,000 room property. I went through every sub-department within the front office, every sub-department within the food and beverage division. And ultimately got promoted up to the catering sales office. And after about 2.5 years of working in a learning laboratory, a 2,000 room hotel, which, by the way, in retrospect, I wish I would have done that before going to hotel school. It would have meant a lot more to me. But in any event, after 2.5 years, I sort of realized, I love the hotel business, but this is not something that I want to do for the rest of my life.
Sure.
And so I was fortunate to be able to sort of segue into the real estate valuation end of the business, and a gentleman by the name of Steve Rushmore. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before, but he had started a company in 1981 called Hospitality Valuation Services. Today it's known as HVS.
Okay.
Very well known within the hospitality industry. Candidly, for what I do, I mean, that's where I sort of learned the business from. We're friendly competitors.
Okay. So he was your mentor at the time.
Correct.
And now you're competing against your mentor.
Well, he's retired.
Okay.
But anyway, I worked at Hilton going through, and so I hooked up with Steve Rushmore, HVS. I spent 13 years with him, building out that company. It was just he and I to start, and by the time I left, I forget, we were pretty substantial in terms of size. I don't recall the details. And then Cushman & Wakefield had been recruiting me for a number of years. I joined them in 1994, 95.
Cushman is a major player.
Yes, yeah. And I launched their hospitality practice within the valuation advisory services silo. It morphed into a transaction business as well. And the last thing I did when I was at Cushman was acquire a firm called Sonneblick Goldman. Okay. They were very oriented towards hospitality brokerage in terms of sales and financings. So I was after 13 years at HVS, I was 11 years at Cushman & Wakefield. Then I joined C.B. Richard Ellis, 2006 to 2010. Sort of did it a third time in my career where I started up a practice, from nothing.
And CBRE is just incredible. They're the largest real estate management firm, I think, in the world still. I was at their LA office opening, maybe 10, 12 years ago when that new office opened. And then, as you probably know as well, part of the Trammell Crow operation was sold to CBRE some years ago. But they're a great organization.
I was at the firm when that transaction occurred. Okay. And it was a game changer.
Yes.
There's no question about that. So I spent 5 years at C.B. Richard Ellis, and I was introduced to my current partner, Evan Weiss, when I was as I was leaving Cushman, and then ended up bringing him on my team at CBRE, and we worked together for 5 years at CBRE, and then ended up forming LW Hospitality Advisors about 14 and a half years ago now.
14 and a half years ago. Wow.
Yeah. We started, no business plan. We had nothing. And
wow.
What we did have, which was kind of interesting, is so he and I had talked about, doing something together. We're both entrepreneurial type folks. There's a little bit of an age difference between us. We're about 25 years apart in age.
Okay.
So it was mid-December of 2010, and I was kind of done at CBRE. He was done. And we were like, well, you want to just go, let's just start up LW Hospitality. It was mid-December 2010. We literally went to the TikTok Diner on 8th Avenue and 34th Street in the New Yorker Hotel. And on the back of a napkin, we scribbled out a deal.
Nice.
And then we went across the street, and we went to Regis and leased, 2 small offices for 6 months. So as we were leaving CB, I was letting folks know, like, hey, I can get you set up on your needs, but I'm not going to be here, beginning of the year. And they're like, well, we're not hiring CB, we're hiring you. It's like, okay, well, call me in the new year.
I love it.
And how blessed we were. I mean, you don't often hear about business startups that actually have business to execute before they legally get formed.
Right. And you're right. That's probably a great lesson to some of our listeners in starting that business. Now, that's tricky because I've had HR roll up to me as well at various different companies. And so the idea of taking someone's clients to a new firm can get a little tricky. Law firms, it happens all the time, maybe marketing agencies, but it can be a little tricky. And sometimes the companies will come after if they believe that you've taken their client without their engagement in that process. But it's really a unique lesson, though, and coming up with the idea like you did, just on the spot, and then figuring out a path and getting people that trust you to invest in your new business.
I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I know what you're talking about. I worked at large companies, right? However, if an announcement is made that Dan Lesser is now domiciled on this platform, That's totally fair game. And
Absolutely.
anybody who calls me, I will tell you, I did learn the art of sort of self-promotion and personal branding, if you will,
Right.
from Steve Rushmore back in the early 80s.
Okay.
He literally wrote a textbook. I think I said this earlier. He wrote a textbook called The Valuation of Hotels and Motels.
Right.
And this was in 1980, 81, when the first personal computer came out, the Apple IIe.
Okay.
And that was a real inflection point for analyzing commercial real estate, because in the old days, it was capping, direct cap. You cap a single NOI. And then when we had spreadsheets, VisiCalc was the original spreadsheet. You could start doing 10-year discounted cash flows, which is what institutional investors did. And market consultants started doing it as well. And so that book came out right at the same time that 10-year discounted cash flow was developed, and he became an authority.
Oh, wow. Great timing.
And he spoke and he wrote books and he articles, whatever. And he also was not an academic genius. So I was like, oh, okay. Anyway.
But here's something great. I've been spending a lot of time with high school students that are probably just average. But they need that level of inspiration, that you don't need to be at the top of your graduating class to do exceptionally well. In fact, a lot of business owners aren't. so no, that's inspirational to hear.
I actually won the award for least likely to succeed coming out of Cornell University.
Really? That's too funny. Now, in 2010, though, I think for people listening, you have to put that year in perspective, because we're still in the middle of a financial crisis worldwide. So the idea that you would leave and start your own business right in the middle of a major housing and financial crisis is just, in some respects, absurd, but you did it.
I did. And I will tell you, and I say this humbly, I knew the timing was right.
Right.
And why did I know? I knew because in 1994, 95, when I left HVS after 13 years and I joined Cushman & Wakefield, who, by the way, had been recruiting me over a period of 8 years, 3 different occasions. And the third time came up in 94, 95. And if you remember, I think you were old enough to be around then. The early 90s were some dark days in commercial real estate. The U.S. government was at one point the largest hotel owner in America, having taken over the Resolution Trust Corporation, took over all these savings and loans.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. Most people don't realize that late 80s for the savings and loans was a major, major challenge. In fact, I worked in the housing industry, and one of the largest developers was based in Houston. And they were greatly impacted by the savings and loans issues back then. But no, you're right. The early 90s was very difficult.
Right. So in 94, I joined Cushman & Wakefield, and I will tell you, I was asking myself, and I had colleagues asking myself, like, what's wrong with you? We're in the middle of a depression. Right. Like, how can you go? And I was like, yeah, I know. And, and I was scared, I will tell you that, but it ended up working out, right? And 95, 96, 97, I mean,
took off.
It took off. So my timing, in retrospect, right, and although I wasted a lot of emotional energy worrying, right, it all worked out, right? So when we went through the great financial crisis in 08, 09, and as you said, it was deep and painful, right? I had a sixth sense that 10, 11 is going to be a good time too. So that's how I knew.
Do me a favor, talk about the industry in full. Your presentation had, and I printed it out last night as well, just so I can relook at it again from the conference that we both attended. But talk about the size of the industry that you're engaged in. From some of my math, and I don't know if this is right, but this is from Forbes. They say that globally, it's the lodging and hotel industry is a $4.7 trillion industry, and they expect it to grow to $5.8 trillion by 2027. Again, I don't know if that's right. You're in the data analytics side, but help our listener understand the opportunity available in your industry.
Well, I think the number you just quoted was travel, right? It wasn't hotel.
Well, you're correct. Yes, it was in travel. No. Correct.
But that's a good. When people travel, they stay in hotels. Right. Obviously, now they're also staying in short-term rentals. They're also on cruises.
Sure.
That's a whole nother issue, in that short-term rentals and cruises are growing in terms of accommodating guests,
Right.
and hotels have kind of flattened out a little. That's
Interesting.
a different topic.
Yeah.
That's a different topic, though. What was the?
Yeah. So how large is the hotel industry? What is it that someone looking to get in can expect to see, and what their opportunities are?
Right. So I recall now what I wanted to say. COVID was very much a defining moment vis-a-vis human beings coming to realize that life can be short.
Right.
Right. And everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people cooped up for a long period of time. And then as we came out of that, if you ever heard the term revenge travel, I mean, and in the early days of being able to come out of COVID, people were driving to destinations to get away. So drive to resorts, really benefited. The leisure markets really benefited in drive-to locations, right? Whereas corporate business and group meetings was, just still not really doing well at all,
right? Because
people weren't traveling on business. So what I'm trying to point out here is that experiential, right, is a phenomenon now that is much bigger than owning stuff. Right. The world has evolved where, yeah, sure, people still shop till they drop. There's no question about it. But having experiences in life, which includes travel, right, it is just a big thing now. And it's not going away anytime soon. And so I'm not surprised with those statistics in terms of the growth of global travel. And that's a beautiful thing for the lodging industry. Now, I will say that lodging does include these other forms that I mentioned, short-term rentals. Cruises are not included, but people love to travel. People, human contact, and we learned this during COVID too, right? Like this format is okay, right? But it's a whole different animal if you and I were literally sitting in front of each other, looking at each other in the eyes, because I see your eyes, but I don't see inside your eyes, and you don't see inside my eyes. And there's nothing like that, right? And people yearn for human contact and just, connectivity. Right. And so the hotel industry is a phenomenal business. It's growing by leaps and bounds. It's evolved over the years. Most hotel branded companies, Marriott's family of brands, Hilton's family of brands, they don't own a whole lot of real estate. Right. A lot of people don't know that. Right. They own the brand identification. They own the reservation system. They own all the intellectual capital, right? And it's a known brand, right? But they don't own the real estate. And back in the old days, they used to actually lease the real estate, the hotel companies. Yeah. Back in the 50s and 60s, they were leasing. And then they realized, like, wait a second, all the risk is on me, the tenant, the landlord's collecting rent. We should reverse this. And that's when the notion of hotel management contracts came around, right? Where the Marriotts and the Hiltons of the world were like, wait a second, we're not going to lease anymore. You're going to own it, and we're going to manage it for you on a third-party contract, and we're going to work off of gross revenues and some part of the profit, right? As opposed to paying you rent, right? Before, even if we don't have, if the cash flow doesn't cover it. So that was a phenomenon that happened in the late 60s, early 70s. And then the whole real estate aspect, institutional money getting into hotels. Hotels used to be considered sort of a stepchild of commercial real estate because it's very unlike other forms of real estate. It is. Think about a 10-story office building with 10 tenants, right, that sign 10-year leases, all creditworthy. Once you lease it up, your cash flow coming in is pretty steady. Right. It's not that much. There's not that much brain power involved in sort of managing the building. Right. A hotel, you're leasing up guest rooms every single night. With technology being what it is, the pricing of those rooms changes by the nanosecond, which in a rising market's a beautiful thing. In a declining market, it can kill you. Right. And then think about all the other revenue streams that a full service hotel has. Way beyond putting heads in beds, right? Food, beverage.
I'd love for you to decode a little the idea of changing prices, because you're right. It's much like the airline industry. depending on when you look, the price could be vastly different. And then the other thing I'd love for you to talk about is maybe average occupancy. But I wanted to tell you that I don't know if you've had a chance to visit Conrad Hilton's first hotel. So I visited, it's in Cisco, Texas, but I've gotten a chance to look at his evolution. He's very active, or the family is very active with the University of Houston's hotel management program, phenomenal program. But just looking at his evolution and the hotels that they had, he ended up having to sell a couple of hotels. Then he moved to California and continued to grow the business. But the hotel industry is so complex because it's unlike a lot of the other commercial properties you mentioned. But tell us more about the changing prices and how that looks and how that impacts a consumer, but also impacts the owner.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, when you look at, first of all, the hotel industry, the hotel business is always has been and always will be a street corner business.
Right.
So although I and lots of folks, we do talk about national averages, and investors also look at national averages, when you're looking at specific deals, you need to look at the specific submarket that an asset operates in. Right. And so you can't even just look at New York City, right? You can't even just look at Manhattan, like where in Manhattan is the property located. So it's very submarket driven. And, you look at a market like New York today, New York has really rebounded amazingly from the dark days of COVID. Back then, it was written off. New York was done, never coming back. I mean, it was a disaster. The streets were empty. All the hotels were closed. Now, the sort of quality of life, went down because homeless and, migrants and all the, a lot of blight came back to New York. But in spite of that, the city is really back. I mean, people are back in the office, group meetings and conventions are back, leisure patronage is back. Nice. And so in markets like New York, where it's really tough to get a hotel room, I mean, New York runs 83% on an annual basis. But what that means is that during peak periods, you can't get a room, right? And so you have to go out to New Jersey or to Queens or up into Westchester, right? And so there's a lot of pricing power when that happens. And so if you look at the increase in average room rates, they're going up dramatically in New York because of that phenomenon.
Interesting.
Right?
What's the normal price? Oh, go ahead.
In San Francisco, they're a lot behind in terms of coming back. There are some folks who think San Francisco will never come back.
Really?
I think that's ridiculous. I'm a big fan of San Francisco now. Now's the time to be getting in. There have been some big office trades at pennies on the dollar. We're going to start to see hotel trades at pennies on the dollar as well. But the point is that supply and demand, that's really what it is. So coming back to your pricing question, right? And the airlines, right? It is a very similar model to the airlines. There's no question about that. If you think about it, a plane that takes off with an empty seat, that's a perishable commodity. Right. You can never resell it. Right. Same thing with an empty hotel room, right? One night, you can never resell it.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a yield management game is really what it is between occupancy and rate.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I was talking to someone who's an expert in the hotel industry about a week ago, and I was intrigued. I saw a commercial that emphasized booking their hotel room directly on the hotel site versus using a third party. But the way they emphasized it was so strategically intriguing to me. It was a soft introduction to the consumer, but I could tell what they were trying to do, and they were probably trying to reduce the fees and the payouts that are associated with the third party organizations. But I thought that was fascinating.
You're a smart guy. Who was this, by the way?
I forget which brand it was, or the person I was with. It was at a hotel conference, but it was really fascinating. Some of my favorite hotels, by the way, the Marriott Marquis in Times Square, one of my favorites. The St. Regis out in Orange County. I heard that sold a couple years ago, and I missed that. But my favorite is the Montage in Laguna Beach.
Oh, yeah. Nice place.
It's very wonderful, nice. Wonderful place. I traveled out to California during COVID, I think 22, and traveled the coast on Route 1, and we passed through Santa Barbara. And I was surprised at how expensive the hotels were in Santa Barbara. And I'm told that they're normally that way. We couldn't find an inexpensive hotel. I think the most inexpensive was $470 to $500 per night in Santa Barbara, which was just intriguing to me.
Let me come back to your query about online travel agencies.
Yes.
OTAs, online travel agencies. So back in the great financial crisis in 2008-9, hotel business really took it on the chin. And there was a confluence of events that happened at the time where technology companies figured out the whole reservation piece of travel, whether it be for car rentals, airline seats, or hotel rooms. Focusing just on the hotel industry, hotel industry has always been very sort of behind the curve, embracing technology, and very reactive as opposed to proactive. And in 08, 09, when the world went through some great financial pain, including the hotel industry, and online travel agents came around, the hotel companies were like, this is manna from heaven, and embraced it entirely.
Right.
And then as we got out of that, that time, right, when I started my firm in 11, right, 12, and as things got better, right, for the hotel industry as well, the hotel companies were like, wait a second, what did we just do here? We gave up our most precious commodity, the head in the bed. We don't have control on the guest anymore. Right. It's this third party that has control on the guest. That was a big issue. And so that's when the hotel companies were like, whoa, wait a second, and so direct booking, or brand.com, a lot of folks within the industry call it. I mean, yeah, if you think about it, the economics of booking directly with Marriott or Hilton, right, is going to be different than going to an OTA. Right. I will tell you that I've never, well, I shouldn't say never, because I have maybe once or twice booked through an OTA just to experience it. Sort of like Airbnb. I did that once or twice too. I'll never do it again. I don't understand why anybody would use an online travel agent as opposed to book direct, whether it's for car rentals, airlines, or hotels. Because if you think about it, if you have a problem, right, the vendor can say, well, wait a second, you didn't buy it from me. You bought it from that third party. Go talk to them. And that happens in the hotel side of things. And
I hear that a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know why anybody would book with an OTA, online travel agent. And I think for the most part, the brands, they somehow I think try to offer the lowest price, or maybe they guarantee the lowest price. Right. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It gets a little complicated. Interestingly enough, in the housing industry, they have a similar dynamic. A lot of the large builders prefer to sell direct to the homeowner versus going through another realtor, because you have to split the commission on it. And so it gets a little tricky. On the 48 assets that you acquired through receivership, how complex of a deal does that become? What does that look like? Of course, not mentioning any details that you can, but that's a major transaction. And anyone in any part of finance or investments would really appreciate understanding the complexity of that kind of deal.
Well, first of all, I didn't acquire it. I was the court-appointed receiver.
Correct.
And generally, when there's a court-appointed receiver, a third-party broker will be retained to facilitate some sort of a transaction, whether it's a recapitalization or an outright sale. The special servicer that I was working with, they were adamant they did not want to hire an intermediary to do that. You got to remember, this was during COVID, right? Right. And they had the vision that at some point, as we came out of COVID, investors, I mean, it was in the public, it was a CMBS deal. It was in the public domain that, this portfolio went the way it did, right? So it wasn't exactly a big secret. As a matter of fact, I saw my name posted somewhere as being, some publication as being the court-appointed receiver. Right. So they had the vision that as we would come out of COVID at some point, nobody knew when that would happen, that there would be interest in this portfolio. And again, they did not want to retain an intermediary, but had this vision that I would start getting calls from investors who would be interested in the portfolio. I will tell you, when I first took it over, these were 48 assets all around the country. I got a tremendous number of calls from brokers, intermediaries. Right. who wanted listings or the listing for the entire portfolio. And I had to explain, like, the special servicer doesn't want to do it. And by the way, the special servicer, go talk to them yourself. I'm not making this up. And it was too premature because, again, we were in COVID and these assets needed to get stabilized. They were not ripe to sell just yet.
Right.
And then sure enough, as we came out of COVID, I started getting inquiries from institutional investors. Well, let me back up a second. At first, when it did get publicized and the brokers were calling, I was also getting a lot of regional owners, hotel owners saying, oh, I'm interested in this one property. I was like, okay, well, first of all, nothing's for sale. And when it goes for sale, it's probably not going to go individually. It's probably going to go bulk, but call me in 6 months type of thing. Anyway, as we came out of COVID, I did start getting calls from institutional investors who were interested in the portfolio. And I ended up sort of running a process, right? No different than an intermediary would do. What I didn't do was I didn't go to the market and produce a book and say, here's the offering and generate the process that way. Rather, it was, and to be totally candid, it really was not that many parties. I mean, obviously I knew how to play the game, and I didn't tell anybody that. I made it sound like there were a lot more interested parties than there were. Let's put it this way. My client was happy, and that's really all that mattered at the end.
Exactly.
Right? And yes, it was a very complicated transaction. There's no question about it. But we got it done, and it's a great story.
And it's a very similar process that companies going through a restructuring bankruptcy will go through. They might appoint someone to help and work with the company through that restructuring to try to get them back on their feet. But that's 48 assets is just a big deal. So I know we're near our time, but Dan, if you had to give some of our listeners and people looking to become entrepreneurs like you some level of inspiration about the hotel industry, what would you tell them about the market? Why should anyone enter the market today in 2025?
Well, are we talking about from a real estate financial point, or are we talking about from operations? Because those are two different businesses.
Well, from let's say an investor perspective, I know you have a lot of operators. Ambridge would be an operator. They operate. I think they're the largest third-party operator management company in the country. But I think either or, but maybe from an ownership perspective.
Yeah, but actually, I'll comment on both. Now that I asked you and I'm thinking about this, operations, hotel operations, it's a great business. It's an exciting business. Unfortunately, the lodging industry on a relative basis doesn't pay that well. And if you're any good in the lodging industry from a management perspective, you end up getting shipped around the United States or the world. And don't get me wrong, some folks really, they don't mind doing that, and they have the hotel business. It's a great, exciting business. There's always action going on in a hotel. So that's the operational side. On the investment side, I mean, listen, it's a very interesting asset class. I mentioned before 10-story office buildings, with 10 tenants, credit worthy. I mean, listen, from an investment perspective, great stuff, right? But from an experiential excitement perspective, you're not going to brag to your friends about that 10-story office building. You're going to brag to your friends about the hotel, right?
Right.
And so if you know what you're doing, and I underscore, if you got to know what you're doing. I've seen lots of people make lots of mistakes, because they didn't know what they were doing. I've even seen folks who did know what they were doing make mistakes, me included. It's a complicated business, the hotel investment arena, but there's so much opportunity, whether on the debt side, on the equity side, on the asset management side, on the predictive analytics side. I mean, there's so many different things that one can do focused on lodging. And I'm a big believer in, excellence through specialization. Right. You can't be an expert on all commercial real estate. Well, I guess maybe you can say that you are, but I don't know how you can be. Right. And I'm the first one to admit that you start talking to me about, retail and industrial, I'm going to sound stupid really quick. Because my specialty is hotels, right? That's what I do. Actually, I wanted to tell you earlier, My legal name is Daniel H. Lesser.
Okay.
My parents knew when I was born. Hotel is my middle name. It's actually Henry.
Sure. That's funny. Well, Dan, I appreciate the insight that you've provided to our listeners. Why would someone, we mentioned a friend that we have in common, Monty Bennett, who's been on the program. Why would the next Monty Bennett come to you? So what would you tell the next Monty Bennett listening to our program about your business and why they should come to you if they're looking to get in hotels?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because Monty, when he went to go work with his dad shortly after he graduated Cornell University's hotel school, I did a lot of market study work for Monty. Monty still takes my call, believe it or not.
Nice. He's a great guy.
He is. Why would they come to me? I mean, listen, this is what I do. I love what I do. It's a passion for me. It's a hobby. It's not work. I'm at the point in life where I don't have to work, but if I didn't work, I don't know what I would do. And I'm so blessed to do what I do. And I didn't get to tell you, but, we have an organization now of about 45 professionals with boots on the ground all over the country.
Okay.
So 14 and a half years later, we've developed quite a practice, and we work on 1,500 different assets a year, and
nice.
It's exciting. I love what I do. So I would highly recommend, young folks that are looking for some excitement. The hotel business is a great place, and then hotel, on the real estate finance side is a phenomenal place.
Very nice. And you're still a New Yorker, right? You remained and always based in New York. Love it.
I'm in New York. Yes.
Hey, Dan, I appreciate you sharing your insight and wisdom, particularly in the hotel and hospitality industry. It was very, very intriguing, first of all, and definitely very insightful.
Well, thank you so much again for having me. It's very flattering and humbling, and I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.